Here's a stat that they never write down, but I think it's one of the most. At this moment, right now, there are more people working in the United States of America than ever before. We've never had anyone, not even 12. Think of that stat, right? Think of that stat.
Want us to solve. And that's lowering the high cost of living and fixing our broken health care system while cleaning up corruption at the same period of time. And the assault on all of the things that have been done, including trying to ease the debt burden that students across this country have confronted, is irresponsible.
Republican or Democrat? Which one are you really? Hey, what's going on, fam? I got a new one for you today. However, this time, I want to have a real conversation with you. Not a lecture, not me telling you what to think or believe. An actual conversation, the kind you'd have with a friend where nobody's trying to win. Everybody's just trying to think out loud together. So here's my confession for today. For years, I called myself a Democrat. And if you'd asked me why, back then, I probably wouldn't have given you a real reason. I would have given you a vibe. It's just what I grew up around. It's what felt like home. I remember the specific moment it started cracking for me. A conversation about a tax bill where I realized I was defending a position I hadn't actually thought through, just because of who was on my side. That got me thinking enough to actually go do the homework. And then at some point, I actually sat myself down and asked, not what team am I on, but what do I actually believe, issue by issue, no jersey on. And what I found kind of surprised me. So that's what I want to walk through with you today, where these two parties actually came from, what they really stand for once you strip away the noise, and my honest, personal story of ending up somewhere I never expected. Are you ready? Good. All right, let's get into this. Okay, so here's something a lot of people don't realize, and I think is genuinely fascinating once you sit with it. The parties you know today are not the parties that existed 100 years ago, not even close. Quick history, and I'll keep it moving. The Republican Party was founded in the 1850s, and the whole reason it existed was to oppose the expansion of slavery. Lincoln was a Republican. For decades after the Civil War, Black Americans who could vote overwhelmingly voted Republican, the party of Lincoln, the party of the Union. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party, for most of that stretch, was the party of the South, the party defending segregation. I know that sounds backwards, especially if you've only ever known today's alignment, but that's kind of the point. Then the 1960s happened, and this is the real hinge. Democratic President Lyndon Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Southern Democrats, the ones who'd been Democrats specifically because of segregation, feel betrayed and start leaving for the Republican Party over the next couple decades. That part's documented. That part's real. Strom Thurmond, a sitting Democratic senator, literally switched to the Republican Party in 1964, specifically over civil rights. That's not a rumor. That's a guy who stood up and changed his own jersey, live, on the record, because of this exact issue. A few years later, Nixon's campaign leaned into the same shift, what people now call the Southern strategy, courting exactly those voters who felt like their old party had left them behind. Quick fun fact while we're here. You know the elephant and the donkey? Those weren't meant as official party symbols. The donkey actually traces back to Andrew Jackson's opponents calling him a jackass during his 1828 campaign. Jackson leaned into it and even used the donkey on his campaign materials. Thomas Nast later popularized it in an 1870 cartoon. The elephant first showed up in his 1874 cartoon, The Third Term Panic, where he drew a donkey disguised as a lion, scaring a whole zoo of animals, including an elephant labeled the Republican vote. Neither party officially adopted these symbols. They just stuck because the cartoons were so widely circulated, and the parties gradually embraced them over the following decades. Okay, now back to our original conversation. Here's where I want to push back on the story we're usually told, and this is the part I actually care about. Yes, the party's rhetoric on civil rights changed. What I'm not convinced changed is whether Black America actually came out ahead. Because right alongside that civil rights shift, you get the build out of the welfare state. And economists like Thomas Sowell have argued for decades that those programs, the way they were structured, didn't build up Black families. They built dependency, discouraged two-parent households, created a voting bloc instead of actual prosperity. So my honest take, and you can push back on me in the comments if you disagree, the party changed its language on race. I don't think it changed the outcome. And I think that's worth giving some thought to instead of just accepting the version we're handed. So where did all of this land by the time the dust settled? By the time you get to Reagan in the 80s, the realignment is basically locked in. Republicans become the party of smaller government, lower taxes, traditional social values, and a harder line on foreign policy. Democrats become the party of government-provided social programs, civil rights expansion, and progressive social policy. That's the skeleton. Everything since has been building on top of that foundation. All right, so let's strip away the media hit pieces and grandstanding for a second. It means nothing in the grand scheme of things. All I care about is what do these parties actually believe at the core? And do those beliefs align with mine? That's it. It's just that simple. Republicans, broadly, smaller federal government, lower taxes, more power to states instead of Washington, free markets with less regulation, more traditional social values, and historically, a strong military foreign policy stance, though that's shifted some lately toward more skepticism of getting involved overseas. Democrats, broadly, a bigger federal role in providing things like health care and education, higher taxes on higher earners to fund that, more regulation of business and the environment, and a more progressive stance on social issues. If I had to boil down the core disagreement to one sentence, Democrats generally believe government should step in to share the load and guarantee a floor for people. Republicans generally believe you get further by clearing the obstacles out of people's way and letting them build without a ceiling on what they can do. Now, both sides break their own rule plenty. Republicans aren't exactly hands-off on defense spending or immigration enforcement, and Democrats talk a lot about clearing roadblocks too. But if you're asking what each side instinctively reaches for first, a helping hand or a cleared path, that's the real fork in the road. You can actually watch this play out in real time if you pay attention to any given year's headlines. Tax policy fights, healthcare fights, minimum wage fights. They're all just the same floor versus ceiling argument wearing a different costume. Reagan cut taxes in the 80s on the theory that letting people and businesses keep more of their own money would grow the whole pie. Democrats pushed back the same decade, arguing that theory mostly benefited people who were already doing fine, and that without government stepping in, the gap just widens. Neither side's ever fully won that argument. We're still having it today, just with different names on the bill. Now, I'll be honest. While the Republican Party believes in smaller government, it doesn't believe it across the board. Republicans aren't exactly hands-off when it comes to defense spending. And here's my personal take on that. I don't apologize for wanting a strong defense budget. Freedom isn't free. Somebody has to pay for the capability to protect it. And I think that's one place where I want government big and well-funded. And honestly, I think people underrate just how much the U.S. military has actually kept the peace, not just fought wars. Look at NATO. My honest opinion, if the U.S. wasn't anchoring that alliance, I think there's a real chance Russia would have already moved on more of Europe by now. Having the strongest military in the world isn't just about fighting. A lot of the time, it's about making sure the fight never has to happen in the first place. That's part of why I don't flinch at a big defense budget. I see it less as government bloat and more as the one government expense that's actually buying peace, not just spending money. Same with border and immigration enforcement. That's another area where Republicans generally want a strong federal hand, not a small one. And honestly, I'm with them on that too. You can't have a country without strong borders. That's not a small government issue to me. That's just what a country is. Where I actually part ways with big government is on the redistribution side. Higher taxes on some people to fund direct transfers to others. That's where my answer is no. Defense and borders, I want government strong. Redistributing wealth, I want government out of it. And the reason I bring up wealth redistribution specifically is because Democrats love to call it something else. They call it free stuff. Free healthcare, free childcare, free college. You've heard the pitch. But let's be real. That is wealth redistribution, plain and simple. And they'll tell you it's only going to come from the rich, from the billionaires, from the corporations. But it never actually works out that way. The middle class always ends up footing the bill. I actually did a whole video breaking this down. Go check out my video on Tax the Rich if you want to dig deeper into that. And that's exactly the kind of thing I mean when I say, don't just accept the label. Go find out where you actually land on each piece, because I guarantee you, it's not going to be 100% down one party line. And mine sure isn't either. Now here's what I actually want you to notice. Neither of these is good guys versus bad guys. They're different answers to the same real question. What's the right relationship between the individual, the community, and the government? Republicans generally trust individuals and local communities to handle more of that themselves. Democrats generally trust a stronger federal hand to guarantee more equal outcomes. That's the actual philosophical fork in the road. Everything else, the specific policies, the arguments, the talking points, comes out of that one core disagreement. Keep that fork in mind because it's exactly what I had to wrestle with myself. So let me bring it back to me because I promise you this was personal. I grew up around Democrats. Most of my family, my whole community, that was just the water I swam in. Being a Democrat wasn't something I concluded. It was something I inherited, the same way you inherit your dad's favorite football team. There was this one conversation that really stuck with me. Somebody brought up a tax proposal, and I immediately started arguing against it, like reflexively, almost on autopilot. But halfway through, it hit me. I couldn't actually explain why I was against it. I was just repeating what I'd heard people around me say, taking a stance because that's what my side was supposed to believe. And that was a genuinely uncomfortable realization. The idea that I'd been walking around with strong opinions I'd never actually pressure tested. That was the thing that finally made me stop inheriting my politics and start actually doing the work. What actually changed it for me wasn't some lightning bolt moment. It was sitting down, honestly, issue by issue, taxes, spending, how much I actually trust a big centralized system versus personal responsibility, and being real with myself about where I landed. And when I added it all up, no jersey on, I realized this sounds like a Republican. Not because anybody told me to think that, because that's just where my own answers lived. And I'll be honest with you, that was a bit uncomfortable. It felt like walking away from people. But I came to realize that your politics should be a conclusion you reach, not a jersey you're handed at birth. If you inherited yours the way you inherited a favorite team, I think you owe it to yourself to actually go check the math. So here's what I want to invite you to do. And I mean genuinely invite. This isn't rhetorical. Forget the labels for 10 minutes. Ask yourself, do you think government should be doing more in your daily life or less? Do you trust a big, centralized system to run things well? Or do you think it gets bloated the bigger it gets? On taxes, should higher earners pay more into the pot, or should people keep more of what they earn? On social issues, where do you actually land? Not where does your friend group land? Let's actually run through one together right now, so you see what I mean. Take taxes. If your gut answer is, the government should take more from people who have more, because it's not fair that some people have so much while others struggle. That's a floor answer. That's a Democrat-leaning instinct. If your gut answer is, people earn what they have, and taking more of it just punishes success and doesn't actually fix anything, that's a ceiling answer. That's a Republican-leaning instinct. Neither answer makes you a bad person. It just tells you something real about how you see the world. But here's a follow-up question I want you to think about for a second as well, and be honest. If your instinct is that people who make more should pay more, ask yourself, would you feel the same way if you hit the lottery tomorrow? If you suddenly came into real money, would you still volunteer to hand over a bigger chunk of it? Or would you start looking at that tax bill a little differently? Be honest. Because here's what I've noticed. People are always generous with other people's money. It's easy to vote for taking more when it's coming out of someone else's pocket. But the moment it's yours, the math starts looking a little different. Now do that same gut check on healthcare, on immigration, on the environment. Add up your honest answers, not the answers you think you're supposed to give, and see what pattern shows up. I guarantee some of you are about to find out you've been rooting for the wrong team this whole time. There are real, nonpartisan tools built for exactly this. Issue-by-issue questionnaires that don't even mention Republican or Democrat until the very end. Go take one, not to convert you, just so the label you're wearing is one you actually chose. Look, I'm not here to recruit you to a team. That's genuinely not what this channel is about. What I want is for you to walk away from this actually thinking. And honestly, I want to hear where you landed. Did you check your own answers and end up right where you started? Did anything here rub you the wrong way? Tell me in the comments. Genuinely, I read them, and I want the disagreement as much as the agreement. That's kind of the whole point of doing this. That's it for today. I hope it got you thinking. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, but above all else, share, because it helps us out tremendously.
As always, much love to each and every one of you, and until next time, I'm out.